Now, the events of the trial and everything that led up to it will go down in history. The death of George Floyd was a catalyst in the Black Lives Matter movement. So to get some context on the historical significance of all of this, I'm joined live by attorney, political analyst, author, and president and CEO of the Bernard Center for Women, Politics, and Public Policy, Michelle Bernard. Good morning, Michelle. It is good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Good morning.
My first question for you, the verdict came down after about 11 hours of deliberation. Were you surprised at the relative swiftness of this verdict?
I wasn't surprised. I was on pins and needles hoping that the verdict would come in sooner rather than later. Federal prosecutors will tell you quite often that the longer the jury is deliberating, the less promising the verdict is going to be for the prosecution. So I thought in hour 10, I started getting very nervous. And then when we knew that the verdict was in at about hour 11 or hour 12, I thought that we were definitely going to get a guilty charge on all three charges.
Is this potentially, there's a lot that's being, there's a lot of weight on this trial and now on the verdict as well. Is this potentially a turning point in these types of cases, or was it just that the evidence was so overwhelming in this particular case?
Tony, I think it's a combination of the two things that you just mentioned. We have not seen in the state of Minnesota before, for example, a white police officer convicted of killing an African American. In Minnesota a few years ago, a black police officer was convicted of the murder of a white woman. So we were really very worried about what would happen here. From that stance, it's definitely a historical change that we have seen. The bottom line is, what is going to happen in the future? Are people going to need to have the type of evidence that we saw in this murder trial in order to convict when police officers wrongly take the lives of Black boys and Black men? And that's a big question all of us are having. But yesterday was a starting point, and it was a very historical and important starting point.
Obviously, the video of George Floyd being killed was hugely significant here, but how significant was it that other police officers actually testified against Derek Chauvin?
Now, that is something I did not expect at all. I was pleasantly surprised. I did expect police officers to join ranks and not testify against him. I think that kudos to all of the police officers who testified against Derek Chauvin in this trial. You know, we always hear the Blue Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter. And I think it was important for the nation to see that there are police officers who truly believe that Black lives absolutely matter. And from that standpoint, I thank them and I congratulate them for doing the right thing. You know, it's one of those things where it can give the Black community some feeling of safety. It might be a very small feeling of safety, but it can give you a sense that there are police officers that are out there that will do the right thing, and that all police officers are not what we saw in Derek Chauvin and the three officers who are going to be charged, who are going to be tried over the summer for the death of George Floyd.
Michelle, one last question for you. How will the judge decide sentencing? We've seen, that in many cases in Minnesota, those who are convicted get about a third to 2/3 of the time that's possible. How likely is it that Chauvin will do significant time?
I think he's going to do very significant time. On the first charge, Tony, I think it's a possibility of 40 years in prison. Second charge, 25. Third charge, 10. Even if the judge gives him a half or a third of what's possible, that's a lifetime in prison. I think it is highly unlikely that Derek Chauvin is going to see the light of day before he is a very, very old man. And quite frankly, if the law in Minnesota had been just a little bit different and they could have charged him with the intentional murder of George Floyd, I think he would have gotten even more time. That charge was not possible in the state of Minnesota from the prosecution's standpoint, but I think that the judge is going to have to abide by what the prosecutors told the world in their closing statements. Listen to what you heard, look at what you saw, And the barbarity with which Chauvin killed George Floyd is something that the judge is going to absolutely have to take into consideration when he sentences him. I don't see Derek Chauvin leaving prison before he is at least 70 to 80 years old.
All right. Michelle Bernard, attorney, author, and political analyst, thank you very much. It's good to see you this morning. Good to have you on the air. We appreciate it.
You too. My pleasure.
All right. We'll talk again soon.